We have such a great guest today. We have two-time Grammy winner, saxophonist, arranger, composer, Ted Nash is with us on the show today. He was born in Los Angeles to a musical family. His father, trombonist Dick Nash, and uncle, the late saxophonist Ted Nash, were both well-known jazz and studio musicians. Nash started playing piano at the age of 7 before learning the clarinet at 12, the alto sax at 13. As a high school student, he studied jazz improvisation with vibraphonist Charlie Shoemake, and he got his first real break at 16 when he was hired by Lionel Hampton for a one-week gig in Hawaii. By the time he reached 17, Nash had played lead alto for Quincy Jones's band and was performing regularly with the bands of Louis Bellson, Toshiko Akiyoshi, and Don Ellis. Turning 18, he recorded his first date as a leader, Conception, for Concord Jazz, and made a permanent move to New York, where he soon became a member of the Jerry Mulligan Big Band. In the 80s, he was featured as a sideman on albums by Shoemake and Shelly Manne before joining the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra and working as both a soloist and arranger for that unit. The 90s found him leading his own quartet, working as a sideman for Louis Bellson, Wynton Marsalis, Joe Lovano, and bassist Ben Allison, who also hired Nash for the music of the pianist Herbie Nichols. In the 90s, Nash recorded as a leader for Maple Shade and the French Illibeth label. After the turn of the millennium, he's recorded both as a leader and sideman for Palmetto. His recordings have received wide critical acclaim, appearing on the Best of lists in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Village Voice, and the Boston Globe. Portrait in Seven Shades, his first big band recording, garnered 2 Grammy nominations. His following big band album, Chakra, received critical acclaim and charted on Billboard. He received 2 Grammy Awards for Presidential Suite, his most significant work recently, inspired by great political speeches of the 20th century dealing with the theme of freedom, and is read by significant figures from the world of entertainment, politics, and sports, including the actors Glenn Close, Sam Waterston, Ambassador Andrew Young, Senator Joe Lieberman, authors Deepak Chopra, Douglas Brinkley, and many, many more. He's the co-founder of the New York-based Jazz Composers Collective, a musician-run nonprofit entity dedicated to presenting the original works of composers pushing the boundaries of their self-expression. Nash is also a long-standing member of the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. His latest album is the Ted Nash Quintet, live at Dizzy's, released 2018. Ted, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you.
It's an
great.
epic intro, right?
But man, we don't even have to do the interview now.
But man, I'm telling you, you have an epic career. So I want to dive into a couple of things. And let's actually start when you first learned jazz improvisation. Now, it says here you studied with Charlie Shoemake, but your uncle and your dad were great musicians as well. Did they teach you improvisation, or is that something you picked up on your own, or was it with your teacher, Charlie Shoemake?
Well, it's funny because I really wanted to be a classical clarinetist at first. So my dream was to be a classical clarinetist and maybe perhaps do studio work like my dad and my uncle. They were very, very busy doing film music, TV, all of that, and a lot of records. I mean, between the two of them, they've probably been on over 1,000 movies and all of that.
I mean, that's astonishing. That's really astonishing that the two brothers... Actually, could you name some standout films or shows that they've played on? I mean, it might be too numerous to name.
Well, it's interesting because my uncle actually wrote a book, which we've self-published after his passing. And I think the most interesting part of the book is his appendix, where he lists every single thing that he did. He kept the most amazing records of every date that he did. But I can just say that if you know all the Mancini films, and from Breakfast at Tiffany's to all the way through everything that he did, including the early TV shows, they did pretty much everything of Mancini's. But if you think about John Williams, my father did all of his stuff until he started using classical orchestras. Jerry Goldsmith, Bill Conti, Joni Mandel, the Americanization of Emily, which the song Emily comes from. My uncle's on that. So they were truly amazing musicians. They just had this gift for playing melodies, being able to read anything, play anything. And it was I would say an attractive career to look at because they did well financially. They seemed to get a lot of respect from their peers, and people outside of just musicians still seem to know about them and follow their careers.
Did they bring home any cool musicians to hang out with?
Oh, my God, yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, I can tell you about the parties. I'm going back to just when I was getting started improvising and playing solos and stuff. But in the time that I was from my being aware of anything to being fully invested improviser in my teens, I mean, I can remember the wild parties we had. My parents were civil rights activists. So we had parties, fundraisers, meetings. We had the Black Panthers at the house. We had a lot of different groups of people, like the Charles Gary, the attorney, was there. Then the musicians, as I started to understand who was coming, like Carmen McRae, Sonny Chris, the alto player, Sonny Chris would be there. We had Yvonne Lins and Oscar Castroneves. I remember jamming with them on the song Wave on the flute. And it's like, I didn't even know who they were at the time, but like there's some of the heaviest Brazilian composers and players. So no, the household was just filled with music and of all kinds, because my mother liked some styles of music.
Yeah, I read your mom was a jazz musician as well.
She was a fantastic singer, and I think she really could have had a career as a singer had she not, the combination of things, number one, raising kids, being a mom, and sort of feeling like that was her path. And I think truly she was a bit scared and daunted by the idea of being a professional singer and what all the responsibilities that are attached to that. And I think she chose a path that was maybe in some ways more satisfying for her. But she was a fantastic singer, would always sing at our parties.
Quick question. Now, you come from such a musical family. Do you have perfect pitch, or is it developed relative pitch?
No, I don't know. First, I can't sing, so even if I had perfect pitch, you wouldn't know. I don't have perfect pitch. I always say I don't have perfect pitch because I'm pretty sure I don't, and I've proven that many times. I have very good relative pitch, and I can hear qualities really well and intervals really well. So I think that's really important as an improviser. Maybe it's a more important thing to have as a jazz improviser than perfect pitch. I think perfect pitch can help so much if you're just coming in cold to something and you want to grab a note or you hear something. And I do know people with perfect pitch, and they have a tremendous ability that helps them in so many ways. But I think relative pitch is really important. And as an improviser, I mean, you did ask about how I got started, and my teacher, Charlie Shoemake, who you mentioned, is a vibes player, and he plays piano as well. And he's the one I studied improvisation with, and it started by memorizing great jazz solos, Charlie Parker.
Oh, this is crazy. You said in an interview that you memorized something like a ridiculous number of solos. Now, could you talk about that?
Yeah. You get your Saturday afternoon lesson, and all week you're working on this, and you're not thinking that much about it. But over a period of like 3 years, I would say, where my goal was to memorize a solo, my lesson was to memorize a solo, one per week, and maybe if many times it was one per 2 weeks, whatever. But over that period of 3 years, I probably memorized 80 to 100 bebop solos, basically.
Now, wait, when you say the solo, are you talking about how many choruses would that typically be?
Might be like 3 choruses of Charlie Parker Blues, or 1 or 2 choruses of I Got Rhythm, or a standard. So, and I just by sheer, it's crazy. And this is why I think a lot of people, when they don't spend time transcribing and playing other people's music in the beginning, they don't develop the strong language. This basically gives you the language.
Back then, they didn't have the OmniBook, right? So did you transcribe? How did you slow down records, or did your teacher show it to you?
Well, we didn't have digital equipment. This is like mid-'70s. So when I'm 15, 14, I would just put the LP down to a slower, and that would help. Or my teacher did most of the transcribing. So in the regular lessons, ordinarily he would hand me a transcribed solo. So I didn't do the transcription work for my lessons. But when I would hear something, I'd be like, "What is that? I want to know what that is." I would transcribe it myself, and sometimes it takes a long time, And then, you've done that. It's the single line thing starts to get faster because you hear groups of notes. Like at first, you're like getting each note. Then you're getting, you understand the phrase. You've heard it. you've heard people do this because it's a language. So you hear da-da-da-da-da-da, whatever, and then you just write that out, the whole thing. You can write out 8 notes at a time if you really understand what's happening. So it can go faster and faster as you gain more ability with the language. Then I turned to trying to do chordal stuff like Herbie Hancock. I remember spending 12 hours transcribing the intro to SiorA. And
wait, talk about that. That's really interesting. So, So you had the record and you just sat down and worked at it for seems like a really long time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to my childhood and my parents and the civil rights activities they were doing, because we had these parties that I was mentioning, and Motown, some kind of jazz stuff, Stevie Wonder, certain pop stuff would be primarily what was happening at these parties. I would say mostly on the Motown side. And then at a certain point, people would say, cornbread, put on cornbread. And that was the name of Lee Morgan's record. But what they wanted to hear was that one song, SiorA. Boo, 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 boo. It started off with Herbie Hancock. Boo, boo, boo. Boo, 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 doo, doo. It's like the most perfect intro to a song. It's one chorus, improvised intro. And as a kid, I didn't even know what improvisation was. I thought everything everybody played was a melody or written out. So, when you're young, you don't, if the guy's improvising. You just hear the sound of the music. So I always thought that was the song, that Herbie Hancock intro. But then, of course, later, when I'm a jazz musician, and I was in my 20s, I believe, I was like, this is a magical minute of music that is not only perfect in so many ways harmonically, musically, but also reminds me of my childhood, is very nostalgic, reminds me of my parents, reminds me of these parties and my childhood and all that. So it was more just, it was more than just trying to learn the notes and the chords. It was embracing something that gave me a feeling that is deeply connected to my childhood. So I felt like that whole day that I spent doing it was worth every bit of musical and emotional sort of responses that I got from it.
Now, here's the thing. A lot of students, they understand the need for transcription, but how do you extract vocabulary and play around with with solos? Because at a certain point, you have to cut it up, right? And kind of use different parts of solos, maybe in different sections, and try to experiment. When did you start to really feel really creative of building lines and taking lines and putting them in different spots?
Well, like I say, the first couple of years for me, and I think for most people, is sort of just gaining the ability to play the language, and it's maybe not as personal. I mean, I think a lot of people do this. Certainly for me, it was just, I don't mean master, but it was sort of like getting the ability to just play eighth note lines running through a set of chord changes. And it felt very satisfying when I finally could do that, because it was very frustrating for the first year where I just, when I would solo, I would stop a lot because I couldn't get my lines to flow through. I mean, we're talking about some very specific heady stuff here, but...
And wait, how old were you? Was this around 15, 16?
14.
Okay.
And I would say it was around the time that I was 15 that all of a sudden it just all came together. It's like, if you can have faith that the work that you do is going to pay off, then you're not worried about individual day results like, I still sound as sad as I did yesterday, or, worried about, I'm a little better today. No, it's like, do the work. Don't worry so much about it, because ultimately, as long as you're practicing and doing the right kind of practicing and listening and working on all of your music, at a certain point, it just gets better. And that's not even a choice. It will get better. So, of course, I didn't think about that. But I did practice for 3 hours a day or whatever after school.
So was it 3 hours a day? Were you very consistent?
No, I wasn't real consistent. But I would say during the Monday through Friday, sort of come home from school, that would be the thing that I would do before dinner. It was pretty much, just practice, put on my lessons and listen to music and play along with records. I felt like, so I think, it's a sort of a academic, necessary, but academic process we go through where we transcribe people's notes and we play them back But what's so interesting is that at a certain point, if that's all you're doing, getting the notes, you're not actually transcribing the most important part, and that's the environment. So you don't just transcribe a bunch of notes, because that's part of it, but you have to transcribe the feeling, the spirituality behind what's going on in the soul. Like, what are they feeling? Are they creating a bluesy feeling here? Is this more frenetic? And when you put on the record, maybe instead of just playing the exact notes of the soloist, you play the implied sort of environments that they're coming up with. So are they expressing something? Are they playing louder? Are they leaving space? Are they developing a cell? Are they doing something funny with their sound? So do all of those things. It doesn't have to be the right notes or the same notes or whatever, but if you develop an instinct for creating solos that are balanced and that have a lot of spirituality in them, and I think we, as teachers and young players, we don't really think about that or teach that.
Now, you mentioned some of your main alto influences in there was a great interview you did with Geoff Woodwinds. I thought it was a really nice interview. You mentioned some of your main alto influences were Phil Woods, Cannonball Adderley, Bird. Could you talk, I'll just say a name and then maybe just give a few sentences just about that player and what really stands out to you for that particular player. So if I said Phil Woods.
Absolute confidence and security in his sound and his playing and his ideas. He had the most faultless technique. I felt that he really sang on his alto, and I loved his sound.
What about Cannonball Adderley? You said you can't go wrong with the recording from a Cannonball.
Oh, yeah.
So talk about Cannonball Adderley.
Well, also one of the most beautiful alto tones, but just absolute swing and spirit. Talking about spirituality, his spirit and his swing, just the way he swings his eighth notes, the way he shapes his lines and articulates. It's so personal. And the thing is that, we want to copy stuff like that and sound like that. I know some people who do. And, well, if you end up sounding like somebody else, that's what you sound like, not like yourself. But it's so easy to want to sound like Cannonball.
If I asked you, I said, Ted, what's the sound that you are going for? Do you consciously think of that, or do you let other people come up with descriptions for your sound? When you're playing and practicing and working, do you have something that you're shooting for?
Not specifically. I don't think so. I mean, I know that rather than break that down musically, I could break it down more emotionally. I know in the beginning, I was trying to develop my technique, but I thought that people would be impressed if I could play a lot of notes. So one time, I remember I was playing at the Village Vanguard with the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, but it was the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra at the time. I joined the band in the early 80s, and I was there for about 9 years. And people would come in there all the time because it was such a great band with such a great history and great music. One time, I was about ready to solo on something, and I looked over, and Bob Berg had just sat down at the bar. And Bob Berg, who passed away about 10 years ago or so, maybe more, in a car accident, was really one of the greatest tenor players of all time. He was I include in this group of like New York 70s post-train tenor players who he played with Cedar Walton's band. I used to hear him all the time when I was 16. I used to go and hear him in L.A. That band, it was Billy Higgins and Bob and Cedar, Tony Dumas. And I just revered Bob Berg. I very nervously went up and introduced myself at the bar. I think I was 16, and he was kind of cool to me and stuff, and I whatever. So anyway, now I'm in my 20s, maybe 23, 24, and he walks into the Vanguard and sits down to listen, and I'm okay. My goal is set. I'm going to try to impress him. So I play a zillion notes. Now, my solo wasn't that good, and who cares if he thinks I can play a lot of notes or if I have a great harmonic concept? If I'm not creating solos that are meaningful, then it's not impressive. So I would say that what changes over the years, and maybe some people get to this younger, but for me it took a while, was that my goal was not to impress people, but to move them.
Did you become friends with Bob?
No, I didn't, and I didn't talk to him that night. He was a friend of Dick Oates, who sat next to me in the section, but I didn't. I was too shy to go talk to him, or he may have left before I had a chance to. But I did not talk to him, and I've never really talked to him again. And that's okay. I mean, you don't have to be friends with everybody. I've had experiences where I've not done things that I've really regretted. I can look back at a time that I was playing with Louis Bellson. It was like a little, I don't know, not a workshop really, but it was at the Drum Center or something on in downtown New York, and a bunch of drummers were there. I think I was already in the Mel Lewis band, and Mel was there, so I was chatting with Mel, and Louis and I played a few tunes with this quartet, and Elvin Jones was there. And I was like, oh my God, that's Elvin Jones. And so Elvin Jones came up to me, goes, hey man, you sound good. How old are you, man? I'm 20, 21, 22, whatever I was. He says, man, you were playing something, man. I want you to come and sit in with my band on Monday night. We're playing down at the Bottom Line or whatever, Bitter End or whatever it was. And I was like, God, I was just petrified. And I just spent the next 3 days or whatever just scared. And Monday rolled around, and I came up with whatever excuses I could, and I didn't go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I had the opportunity to play with Elvin Jones. He invited me to come and play with him. I did not go. I never met him or played with him again, or had the opportunity again.
Did you feel you weren't ready?
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, you go through these periods where you feel insecure, or you feel like maybe he should hear me when I've got my shit together. Do you know what I mean?
But I mean, like, at 16, you were like a lead alto, right, for Quincy Jones. That must have been pretty good for your confidence, right?
It was for a certain amount of time. And I'll have to tell you that Los Angeles is a pretty big town, that's for sure. But as far as a jazz community goes, it's not like New York. So I was sort of a little bigger fish in a smaller pond, in a sense that I was getting attention. Maybe some of it was because I was young. I'm 17 and whatever. I'm playing in these jazz clubs, playing, people coming out to hear it, getting some reviews and all that. And so maybe I had a false sense of security or confidence. And then I said, okay, New York, that's my next step. 18 years old, moved to New York. And I was like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, I have arrived. I'm here. Let's go. And people were like, yeah, cool, man. Get in the back of that line. You see that line? It goes all the way around the block. That's where you belong. And that's, so there was like a period of maybe 3-4 years where, although I was doing some gigs, my confidence went down a lot. I was also in a relationship with somebody, and she was not very supportive of what I was trying to do, and I felt like that added to the sort of, development of an insecurity.
But looking back, objectively speaking, how would you have gauged your playing?
I had a good harmonic knowledge, and I could play through chord changes really well and play a lot of notes, but I wasn't really getting to something that was extremely personal, I would say, in the beginning. It started to happen for me in my 20s, and certainly with the Mel Lewis band. I experimented a lot with my solos, with either really embracing the swing and the bebop style, or sometimes really going towards something that was much freer and more outside, or, like trying to find ways of playing outside the chords but still make sense out of it. And so it was a good period for me to sort of experiment and figure out what my voice is by trying a lot of different things, and by experimenting and developing in a lot of different parts of your playing, you develop something that becomes who you are at a certain point, hopefully.
I want to jump a little bit to composition and writing and arranging, because you've been writing since you were 15, right? Or maybe even earlier. Were you always creative in the sense that you were writing?
Well, I mean, I would say that, 15, I can remember the situation where I wrote my first tune. I was up at the Monterey Jazz Festival. I was part of the all-state high school band up there. We were just, all-star band or whatever from the state. I think they call it the Next Generation Band or something. But it's back then it was just an all-star or all-state high school band. And I was sitting at the piano on a break, and I started writing this little bossa nova. And, very simple. And I remember a guy named Lauren McClung played tenor in the band with me. And he was like a year older than me, or is a year older than me. and had a little bit more knowledge of some harmony and stuff. And as I was struggling through this bridge, he came over to the piano and he kind of helped me with a couple of the chords. And I felt like by the time I finished writing this little song, it was complete. It was like an AABA form. It had a bridge.
Was that Tristamente?
Yeah, it was Tristamente, and that's the one that ended up on Louis Bellson's record. And so that was my first recorded song. But I don't, as far as writing little songs is one thing. I mean, being a composer, I tend to want to differentiate between someone who's a songwriter or can write a little ditty and someone who's a composer. I mean, composing means, you organize, you think of and organize melodies and harmonies and rhythms to create something. It could be whatever it is. It could be a jingle. It could be a symphonic piece or anything. But I didn't really get more seriously into composing for maybe another 12, 15 years.
Would you say you're self-taught, or did you teach yourself? Did you take composition lessons or seek out a teacher to help you with composition when you were developing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that with the background, with all the harmonic understanding that I had from all the work I did as a jazz musician, there was a lot already in place so that I could understand about how to compose sort of more intuitively. I did not study with anybody formally, and I did not go to music school. I just came to New York. And when I was about 30, the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop was maybe a year or two into its life. And that was a workshop that was taught by Bob Brookmeyer and Manny Album. And that workshop exists today, and I'm actually one of the teachers there. So it's come full circle. But that was an amazing experience, just working under Bob Brookmeyer and Manny Album. And Bob had so many ideas about techniques that you could use to find new ways and explore new areas of music. Because sometimes, we're set with this song form, and we use the traditional harmony and cadences in a way that's been used so much. But like, what about jazz never really embraces like the 20th century classical stuff with 12-tone rows or different ways of. So he was always trying to push you into finding new ways to compose. And I think that little 2-year period did a lot for me in terms of opening me up.
Now, as somebody who's just a listener, would you say that you really have listened to a wide range of music over your life? Like, you've listened to the Bartoks and the classical music, and you've also listened to lots of jazz recordings, and you have a large library of sounds in your head?
I'm somewhere in the middle. I definitely am surrounded by people who know everything that was ever played by anybody in the jazz idiom, and I'm not quite there, And then there's people who know a lot more about, say, film music, or there's people that know every big band record by Count Basie, and there are people who know all about classical music or pop or R&B or, there's just whatever it is. I feel like I have a little bit of a bunch of stuff in sort of my head from listening. I particularly like classical music and 20th century classical music, from the Impressionists up through. I love Berg a lot, Bartok, certainly, Stravinsky. I remember when I was first writing for string quartet, I bought the Bartok string quartets, and I mean, it was, I thought, oh, great, I'm going to look through this stuff and I'm just going to absorb all this. But, I mean, come on. But I'm not, I feel like that's an area that I still feel like I could listen to more music. I don't listen to enough music. There are people who have earphones on or have something going on in the house, a record, constantly listening to music all the time. I almost never listen to music unless I specifically want to listen to it. So, like, if I'm researching something, or if I just feel like I really want to hear this type of music, I'll put on something and listen to it. But I don't listen to music around the clock like a lot of people I know. So I'm definitely not as exposed to so much music as some people.
Now, you have you're really a king when it comes to like big band and like your experience playing in multiple big bands, writing for big bands. So I have to ask you, when it comes to, let's start with writing for big bands, basically, just writing. So when did you get to start writing for big band charts, and how did you develop in that area, and what was really good for you?
Well, sitting in the Mel Lewis band was an experience, because we were playing Thad Jones music. When I joined the band, Bob Brookmeyer was the musical director, and so we were playing a lot of his newer music. He was using the band. He was figuring out new ways to compose for big band. And that was an exciting period, the early 80s. You could check out some of the records he did around 1980, and we were playing some of that music. Jerry Dodge and Bob Mincer, there were a lot of different people who composed for that band. And so just sitting there and hearing this amazing music night after night, Monday after Monday, or on tours, I said, okay. It's like, that thing that you see or you hear, and you're like, what is that? I want to know what that is. Like the first time I heard a dominant chord with a sharp 11, and I was with my friend Lauren McClung, who I mentioned, and I looked at him. Some guy was playing, and all of a sudden he played the sharp 11, and I was like 15. I looked at Lauren. I just looked at him. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He goes, sharp 11. And I looked back at the player. It was like, you want to know these things. What's the secret? What's that magical thing? Like, how do you write for a big band? How do you voice a brass section? So you just say, okay, you listen, you try to read some scores, and you start. And I remember bringing in my first chart. I said, Mel, I'm working on a chart. He says, great, man, bring it down. We'll read it. I said, what do you mean we'll read it? He goes, yeah, we'll play it at the club. We'll just bring it down. I'm like, you don't want to rehearse it? He goes, nah, we never rehearse. Just, we'll sight read it at the club. We'll do it on the third set or something. We used to play 3 sets. We'd get done like 2 in the morning. And so I brought this thing down. I worked like a month on it. It just, and so I brought it down. And okay, let's play it. It lasted like 3 minutes. And he goes, that's it? He said that on the bandstand. He just said, that's it? I said, yeah, I guess I should write a little bit more, huh? And everyone was like, yeah, it's nice, very encouraging. But it's very, very typical of being very young and for something to last 3 minutes. You know what I mean? So, but that was my first chart. And then I said, okay, I want to do this. And so I just continued to write. And I felt like that about other things, like acting. I was just always curious about actors and how they learned their craft. So I took an acting class in New York for about 3 years, and at the HB studio. And I sort of got to understand what it means and what it takes to be an actor. Not that I ever became a good actor, but I wanted to understand it.
If someone were to ask you, what's the top of the top when it comes to big band arranging, could you drop a few names so that with all your knowledge, you can actually differentiate between the different big bands? So like, what's good examples of great writing, like really top of the top?
So funny. People often equate me and what I do with big bands, because there have been so many that I've worked with. And, I think as players, we always want to be in small bands because we have more solo space, and it's like, we're always thinking so. But big bands, they have 5 saxophones, so you always find work. Pardon me. So I've been in a lot of big bands. I've heard a lot of writing. I would say the first big band where I really was interested in the writing that I heard live, that I was able to play with, was Toshiko Akiyoshi. She was very rooted in Duke Ellington, but she had like these twists and turns to her ways of orchestrating, and like her very melodic, but her harmonic movement was very interesting, and it was exotic. And you'd say, well, she's exotic. She's from Japan, and so she's bringing these, and she did bring these elements of Japanese.
I do recognize her name. I remember her name from the Bud Powell biography.
Yeah, well, you hit on that with the Bud Powell thing. She was a Bud Powell. She loved Bud Powell, and she even has, I think, one of the songs dedicated to him. But she made a name when she started writing big band music, and her husband Lou Tabakin is a fantastic saxophonist and flautist, and would do a lot of the primary soloing in the band. But that band just turned me on so much. I can't tell you how. When I first heard that band, I was 15. It was up at the Monterey Jazz Festival, and they were one of the performers at the festival. And I heard them at some other high school festivals. And I was like, oh, my God, this is amazing. And it was very, like I said, exotic, but it was also strongly rooted in this Duke Ellington kind of style of Billy Strayhorn's writing, who was one of the chief orchestrators for Duke Ellington. If you don't know Billy Strayhorn's music, you've got to check out his writing. It's so beautiful. But, then coming out of the Basie tradition, really, the big bands were swing era bands, primarily in the 30s and 40s. Bands, once you got past the sort of the Creole New Orleans bands where everybody was improvising together. Then Duke Ellington and some other people came around and they sort of organized the notes more, right? They took all these improvisations and sort of the free form improv and organized it. And so if you get a large group of people, you have to organize them if you want to have a specific sound. Like if you want to go a certain direction, you have to organize them. So you arrange them. And Duke Ellington started to do that. And so his bands started to get bigger. And then when you get to the 30s and 40s, now you've got these big walls of sound of people just swinging together. The solos became secondary really to the purpose of the swing era was really for people to dance and feel good, especially post-war when there was a lot, during the war and post-depression. So then the bebop stuff, that's kind of sprang wildly out of the swing era because, we were done with all of that. And now our artistry of improvisation became primary, and that's when Charlie Parker did Gillespie. But the big bands, like there's always been an argument about the big bands and did they go away? Are they gone? Are they, whatever. They've always been there, but they don't serve the same purpose. Now with Stan Kenton and different bands in the 50s, no longer are people dancing.
It's more like concert music, would you say?
It's like concert music, exactly. So once the big band became a concert music, then people started to write differently for the big band because no longer do you have to make people dance or inspire them to dance. You can just create something that people can listen to. So it became a little bit more like classical music in a sense that people came and they sat and they listened. So again, now Basie was a band that was a swing era band that sort of crossed over and became a listening band. I mean, Benny Goodman famously also did that, but Thad Jones was the trumpet player and started to arrange for the Basie band, and in the 60s he left Basie and with Mel Lewis formed the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band. And I think Thad Jones became sort of the new exotic writer and composer, and that big band was the hottest thing, and they started playing at the Vanguard in 1966 or 1967, still there. And so there are a lot of big bands, and you kind of see the lineage of where this music came from and how it continues through to today when there are a lot of big band composers that aren't doing this typical big band writing like Darcy James Argue and Maria Schneider. There's a lot of people that are trying to find new ways of using the big band or instrumentation to express something different. And I really have a lot of respect for everybody who's figuring out different ways of expressing using that.
Now with Presidential Suite, I mean that you're harnessing all the resources of the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra and Big Band. Now there's some tremendous resources there. At that point, when you started writing that for that album, did you have a lot of experience with big bands writing, and would you say it was a culmination of all your training and everything? So I guess the question would be, when you seized that challenge, talk about the writing for that and how long did it take you to write everything, and what were the challenges you faced?
Hopefully we're always challenging ourselves. If we become satisfied with where we are, then we're not trying to grow. And I think even with the big band, I mean, I have a lot of experience writing big band charts, and I would say that like sort of music for hire in a sense, because the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra, we do a lot of themed concerts. I mean, it might be anything from the music of John Coltrane to Jazz Meets Brazil to the music of Moacir Santos to, whatever. We often have a theme. And I've written so many big band charts over the past dozen years for Jazz Lincoln Center. I think there's about 70 or 80 charts that I've written for the band. So my experience because of that means that I've developed a craft. It means that I know how to orchestrate. I know the registers of the instruments. I know how to get a certain sound. But it doesn't mean I'm going to make creative choices all the time. I mean, that's the thing. It's like how do you keep challenging yourself so that your new endeavors are creative? And the Presidential Suite was an opportunity for me to say, okay, how can I approach this music? It's different. And by transcribing the speeches for their intonation and then using all that thematic material was extremely challenging for me to still put it into a context that felt that it flowed, that it expressed, that it It didn't sound crazy and wild, because you have to still make something that makes sense, right? So we're always hopefully challenging ourselves and growing. Every time we write a new piece of music, it's an opportunity for us to learn a little bit something new about ourselves, about the process, and hopefully our music keeps growing as a result.
As someone with so much experience, what are 3 pieces of advice you'd give to somebody who's just learning big band writing?
Well, first of all, you have to understand basic thing about harmony and about what the important parts of harmony is. If you take a trombone section and you want to see 3, let's say you have 4 trombones, you're not going to just put one on a C, one on an E, one on a G, one on a B flat like that. Boom. It's so on the nose and it's flat sounding, emotionally. So you have to figure out how to invert sections to hit the primary tone. So you might give the bottom trombone an E, the next trombone a B flat, and then a D, the 9, and then you can put the G on top of that. And so you've spread out the voicing. You've realized that you've outlined the most important part of the chord, the E and the B flat. And this is just basic stuff. What I'm saying is you have to have a basic understanding of how to voice and how to make the section sound good and balanced and all that. A lot of time is spent in just figuring out how to voice the band, or how to orchestrate. But then you have to, besides all of that, you have to understand about cadence and how to use cadences for tension and release, and be able to have control over that. So you're creating emotional responses with the music. You're saying you're building up something. You have to be able to use the band to create emotional responses. And then ultimately you need to hear what's going on. If you're writing everything at the piano or on some instrument and you're just writing everything linear, up and down, like horizontally, like this chord, every voicing in this chord, and it moves, and then you listen to it, it's not flowing. So you have to sit back and you have to actually imagine how this arrangement is going to flow from beginning to end. And if you hear something, you need to grab that. Like, what's next?
Ted, do you write at the piano, or do you just try to give it to a big band and hear it through a big band as much as you can?
I use the piano a lot because it's easier to hear 4 or 5 voices at a time when you're sitting at a chordal instrument. To remind, the more you do it, the more you know what a certain sound is going to sound like, and sometimes you don't need to sit at a chordal instrument and hear all the voices. But I use the piano for orchestration, but I try to do most of my creative work, in other words, really listen to what's happening, just hear, listening and using my thoughts and my feelings, and then trying to capture that. And then I might use the piano to capture certain things that I'm hearing. So the more, like I'm writing a bunch of music right now for string quartet and rhythm section for some concerts we have next week with Eddie Daniels here at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And I started to get even tired of my own process during this particular writing assignment. And I said, okay, I've got to find some new ways to write. So I sat back and I just started free form writing. It's called like linear or through line writing. It's line writing. It's a certain style where you just write the lines and you let them accidentally intersect each other or come together. And so a lot of the harmony that you get is more accidental, say. And then the more you do it, the more you can actually guide that and be more in control of the harmony that comes out of it. But so again, trying to always find new ways to do things.
I want to talk about your new album, Live at Dizzy's. Now, we talked a lot about the big band stuff, but your real small combo stuff is just really great playing as well. So now this is the latest album. Could you talk about the album and what was your goal with this album?
Well, it's funny because the goal wasn't the album, and the goal was to put together a bunch of people I love to play with and do a gig. And basically, like I say, we're all, regardless of what we're doing in terms of playing in big bands and all that, we love to solo and improvise. And so you put together a small band and it just gives you a lot more freedom. I do spend a lot of time with Jazz and Lincoln Center Orchestra, and some of these projects that you mentioned, these big band projects, they're bigger concepts, and I don't really do a lot of improvising on it. So I felt like when we did the gig, it just felt so good. Matt Wilson and his spontaneity, Rufus Reed, all that experience and beautiful sound that he brings to it, and Gary Versace, just he's such an intuitive player, and Warren, amazing. I mean, all such great musicians. The recording was live streamed and recorded. The gig was recorded, and when I listened to it, I said, I want to put out a record where it's just playing, just improvising, and it's not big concept stuff. It's just this another opportunity to say, like, this is a side of me I want people to check out, and I'm so excited to put this record out because I think it's the first time in over 25 years that I've put out something that was a live gig, and I think I want people to check it out because I really do want them to hear all these great players and to hear what comes about when people just go ahead and let themselves feel and be in a moment.
How did you come to put the set list together for this particular date?
Well, it's a combination. It's got some original tunes, but it's a lot of standard. There's like a Chick Corea tune, Johnny Mandel's Emily. There's a Herbie Nichols tune, a Thelonious Monk tune. So it's kind of a cross section of some things that are a little quirky and all that. But for me, it just was a collection of opportunities to improvise, and how we do. We make a set that hopefully balances through different styles and tempos and all that. But the record was just released, so let me do a little bit of promo here. It's called Ted Nash Quintet, live at Dizzy's Club Coca-Cola. It's everywhere you would normally get something, Amazon, iTunes. It's hard copy. There's vinyl, 180 gram vinyl, which I'm really excited about because I actually prefer vinyl. And and you can go to my website, tednash.com. I'm going to have links there where you can we actually have these little packages which are cool, like sets with CDs, the vinyl, sheet music, and also wine. I have a wine business with the great singer Kristen Lee Sargent, who's getting ready to put out her second record, and she's also a sommelier and a wine expert. And we put together a wine that it's really delicious. So we're also going to have that as part of the packages. Just saying, if you like a good full-bodied red. It's called Two Notes Wine. You can also look up twonoteswine.com, and you can check it out and see where it's being held. But so I'm offering some little packages, which is fun. So here, this is my big promo moment.
Can I ask you a few of the tracks? Like, could we talk about the tracks one by one?
We have Epistrophe, Thelonious Monk's Epistrophe.
Yeah, how did you come to choose that song and talk about that track?
Well, first of all, anything by Thelonious Monk is worth playing at any moment. So, and Epistrophe is it's such an interesting tune because of the way the chord structure moves around, and I don't want to get too technical, but you can embrace chords as they're moving, or you can ignore them, and I love that. I love that style. It's like you have a B flat 7 go into a B7 and back and forth, and you can either play the B7 or you can ignore it and let it move back and forth. And there's something about that playfulness of whether you embrace or ignore something. And I think, and then the bridge is so beautiful. And we put a little reggae kind of beat on the top of that. And that was something that I was inspired after hearing a Chris Crenshaw big band arrangement of that song.
Wynton Marsalis, there's a very great quote. He's talking about Ted Nash here. He plays on a virtuosic level all of the reed instruments. He plays them all perfectly in tune and has a personality on each one that's different. And he can read music unbelievably well. So, I mean, that's coming. I mean, anybody would die just to get a compliment from Wynton Marsalis, an amazing player. You guys are good friends.
We've become really good friends. I was always a little nervous around him in the beginning because, well, he's Wynton Marsalis. And the first time I got called to sub on one of the earlier Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra gigs, I was subbing at a rehearsal for Wes Anderson, and I came in and I sight read all the music, and I am a good sight reader. It's just something you do. When you play a lot in big bands, you do a lot of gigs where you have to sight read, you get good at it. I came in, and Wynton didn't understand that he goes, did you get all this music in advance? Why, I don't understand. Why are you playing all this? I was like, no, I'm just reading it. And he goes, you can read like that? So he's always kind of messed with me about that, about my reading, and about going back to that first time that he heard me sight reading. And Ben Wolf was playing bass in the band. He goes, see, I told you, man, you can't play, man. So it's just like that kind of way of welcoming you into their circle was really beautiful, because sometimes you come into this situation.
Now, your uncle and your dad were studio sessions, so were they great readers as well?
Yeah, they were just amazing readers.
Is that something they imparted onto you, or you practiced on your own, or how did you develop your reading?
I mean, I took private lessons, and I sight read a lot of etudes on clarinet and things like that, and then like just playing a lot of music in high school, and then you start doing gigs. You got to read. You got to sight read.
That's it.
Maybe some people aren't very good at it. Maybe there's a talent for it. I think it's just anything. If you do it a lot, you get better at it.
You're really good at a lot of instruments. What's your mindset when it comes to doubling? Is that just you just have to be? Is it part of the job profile in a way, and you just had to get good at it, or did you consciously want to be strong on a bunch of instruments?
Well, yes, and a lot of that, and I mean those are you just mentioned basically everything that it involves. The fact that I started on clarinet as a woodwind instrument was helpful, because that's the harder, I think, of all of them, and then found saxophone later. So that was a good order to take up things. The flute lagged behind for me because I felt like I always had a sort of airy sound, and it wasn't really convincing as far as being like, let's say, a classical flute player or whatever. And I still feel like that, although because I did at a certain point a lot of Broadway shows and some studio work and all of that, I think I developed my flute playing to the point where it's semi-convincing in all the different styles that I need to play at. But, again, that's a commercial application. For me, I love playing the flute now as a creative outlet. I love using it and I do play flute on this new record, the Live at Dizzy's record on Chick Corea's Windows, and I just feel more creative on it. I didn't feel like very creative on it for a long time, and that's what you were asking. But for me, it's a different color. I feel like I do play differently on the different instruments. I do play clarinet on the record as well. It gives me a little different feeling, and I like that feeling.
All right, I guess to end off, I'm going to ask you a bunch of quick questions that are fun.
Okay.
What's your proudest moment in music?
It's interesting when you talk about. I know you want quick answers. It's not the successes. It's not awards. It's when you get that thing, that creative thing, and you figure it out and you do it. For me, that's the biggest reward.
So it's like multiple, like in a way, breakthroughs, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Who is your most important mentor figure? You seem like a really self-driven guy, but did you have a very important mentor figure that's special to you?
Well, my father, of course, was a big mentor just because of his attitude and how much he loved music and how happy he was playing music. Even though my uncle was a reed player, I didn't spend much time with him. But Charlie Shoemake, my teacher, obviously really important. Wynton Marsalis, his seriousness and his diligence and his absolute being in the moment and is constantly an inspiration to me. So I would say that even though he's my age, I mean, he's a mentor to me for sure.
All right, now let's talk specifically saxophone. Who are your top 3 saxophone players?
I mean, I have to go to Sonny Rollins. Everything about what he does, he contains every aspect of music I find important. He's got humor, he's got swing, he's got intensity and emotional content. John Coltrane, obviously, just the spirituality behind his playing and the new areas that he discovered as a player. And I would say that my alto sort of faves have shifted around. Charlie Parker has changed. Because really that music is in everybody. But I would say that in the last few years, Ornette Coleman has been a big influence on me.
Okay, let's talk about classical composers. I really like to throw this at jazz musicians. So who are your top 3 classical composers?
Well, maybe I'll say 3 styles, because I love Ravel and Debussy and Dutilleux, which is a little bit more of a contemporary of theirs, in that impressionist style.
Wait, what's
French,
that?
Obviously.
Who's that third name?
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Dutilleux. He comes
that?
out of the. Google it. Maybe they'll find like I'll look it up.
He's
and I can send you
impressionist.
it.
Okay, wow. I was like, okay.
He's a post-impressionist who died about 10 years ago.
No kid. Okay.
So he was, yeah. And then Alban Berg, my favorite, absolutely.
Talk about Berg. Just give a couple of examples. Why do you like him particularly? He's from that second Viennese school, right?
Yeah, he comes out of the more organized, with rules and different things. He's not a 12-tone composer necessarily, but he created a lot of sort of systems, and he uses the golden mean, which I really like, which is like that series of climaxes. But what I love about him is it seems like he breaks his own rules to create something, and I like that. I like setting up rules and breaking them.
Do you have a piece of Berg's that really hits you?
I would say that check out the opera Lulu. If just the Lulu Suite, that's amazing. Like there's a lot of great recordings of the Lulu Suite, and I can put that on and just go to a completely different place.
So what piece by Ravel do you like?
Daphnis and Chloe is probably one of my favorites.
And you have one more composer you have to mention.
Well, I'm torn between a lot of people. I mean, I love Stravinsky, and I love John Adams. To be honest, I got a chance to work and record with John Adams.
Talk about John Adams. He's more contemporary, but talk about his music.
Well, he's considered sort of a new age minimalist to some degree, which is a newer thing than say the 20th century classical, 20th century thing that I was talking about earlier. If you ask him who his favorite musician and composer is, he says Duke Ellington. Which just the fact that he says that is worth a lot, because a lot of times people don't even recognize jazz or want to even talk about it. So that's cool. And when you listen to, say, Nixon in China, there's sections in there that are right out of Duke Ellington with the brass and like he loves trains. Duke Ellington loved trains. You could hear that in John Adams' music. He also references Impressionism and romance in his music. So even though it's maybe got a serial minimalist base, he has melody and he has passion in his music as well. And he's a cool dude. I really like him. I mean, so I would say of the more modern stuff, he's somebody I really like. Now
let's just make it as broad as possible. Top 3 musicians, just composer/musician, who are just like your favorites?
I love Joe Lovano. I love him, and I love his group with Bill Frisell and Paul Motion. I think they just found something that was really special. Very personal. The more and more I see people who just find something that's extremely personal, I love that. Gonzalo Rubalcaba is one of the baddest dudes, period. Just, I love him. I mean, let me just go on. I mean, Charlie Hayden, or, just there's just so many incredible musicians.
Okay, and now the very final question is, the best piece of advice you could give to somebody who's wanting to learn jazz?
The first thing is just, you've got to listen a lot, and you've got to transcribe, and you've got to put yourself in these environments. And then I would say, just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And that means in terms of your own expression, putting yourself in situations, meeting people, because jazz is a community. It's about people who play together. It's about people who meet each other. If you're sitting in your room and that's all you do, it's cool. But it's about coming together with other people. So go to hear music, go introduce yourself, go to jam sessions, all that stuff. Every single experience you have makes you a little stronger and develop a little bit more.
The Ted Nash Quintet live at Dizzy's Club Coca-Cola. When's it coming out, Ted?
It just got released on May 18th. So it is out there, and we have a couple of gigs coming up with the band. June 16th is our first sort of CD release gig, and that's up at Music Mountain up in Connecticut. So if you're in the New York area, up in Connecticut, Music Mountain, you can just go to their website and check it out. And we're opening up their summer season. So that's exciting. We'll be back at Dizzy's in August 10th, 11th, 12th, the same band playing all of this music and some other stuff.
Ted, thank you so much for coming on the show. You are a phenomenal musician, and just sharing your experiences, just such a thrill for us at the show, and it's just such an honor. All the best with your album. We're definitely going to check it out and buy it, and encourage all my audience to buy it as well. So, Ted, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, Nick, thank you for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing, and keep it going, and I'm going to keep following you. And, man, everybody just go to my website. Tell me what's up. Write me an email. Tell me what you're doing. tednash.com.
Thank you, Ted.